Okay. All right. Hi, Don. So we're here. We just went live. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Kate. For those who are new to this, I'm John Stewart. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm the chief clinical consultant for Postcards for Parents, and join Kate here pretty regularly to have discussions about this complex world of being a parent.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're thrilled to be here and thrilled to have John. I'm Kate Howe. I'm co-founder of Postcards for Parents. And so today we're talking about empathy, which, it's incredibly important, but I also feel like it might be one of those overused words, John, that gets thrown around a lot. And, people might not be sure exactly what it means or like how to do it or why it's important. And then it just kind of becomes part of the wallpaper. So, I was wondering if you could start just by saying kind of how you define empathy as a psychologist. What does it mean? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can probably find a number of different definitions, but it's essentially the capacity to feel what someone else is experiencing. That ability to it's more about an emotional awareness of what's going on, but then we will generally create some sort of narrative to explain it, which is more of a cognitive process. But it always starts on that first level with the feeling. And when it's done well, and when the other person is in a receptive state, the other person has what we call in the attachment world an experience of feeling felt. And feeling felt is one of the building blocks to the development of strong attachment. There's lots of different theories about how it develops, why it develops, how it played out in evolution. Mm-hmm. One of the things that probably 15 years ago they began to identify, maybe even longer at this go, the neuroscientists begin to identify what were called mirror neurons, meaning mm-hmm. neurons that actually had this specific task of looking at someone else or hearing someone else, because mirror neurons can also occur on the auditory level as well as the visual, but that having this involuntary response, this automatic response of mirroring what is being done. And we see that with infants, mm-hmm. that there's this dance back and forth where the baby has an expression. The mom imitates it. They're sad. The mom's sad. They're excited. And that's the beginning of the dance of learning how to recognize. One thing is agency, the sense that who I am and what I feel ends up having the impact on this other person. So it's not only about connection; it's also about the sense that I have agency in the context of relationships. So one other just real quick note about how empathy is learned. It may start with the physiological mirror neurons, but then it goes, there's lots of other things that happen. But one of my favorite sayings that comes out of the attachment work is that empathy is not taught, it's caught.
Okay.
Which means that children develop empathic capacity by being in the presence and the experience of empathically attuned caretakers.
So that's interesting. So you're saying, so it starts with the feeling. So I sort of like observe you, another person, and I get a feeling from you, but it's not only the feeling that I myself kind of get, it's like getting what you might be feeling, right? Is that so? That
it is. Let's say we meet on the street, and you look at me, and you see I'm looking kind of gloomy, and you see me, and your affect kind of matches it, and you reflect it back and say, "How are you doing?" You're not, mm-hmm. So it starts with the feeling, and then there's a reciprocal quality that if the other person is all open to it, both people, their affective experience become aligned for a moment.
Okay. And then talk about, so why is that important in parenting? What is it? So one thing is this agency. So the kid kind of realizes, I have an effect on other people. My mom, my mom or my dad or my teacher or my friend is tuning in. But yeah, so what does that lead to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has an enormous impact on parenting. If there's one skill that we want to take into parenting, and there are others, and some folks, there's going to be a continuum of kind of a spectrum of people who are phenomenally empathically attuned and folks who are not as empathically attuned. And there is some neurocognitive component to it. When we talk about things like autism, and there's some theories that folks with autism do not have the mirror neuron operating as do people who are neurotypical. But so there is this continuum, but so I don't want to suggest that, boy, if you're not high on that spectrum, then your child is destined to be, a train wreck. It's not true. There is a spectrum, and we're all going to have different gifts and strengths and weaknesses that we bring into parenting. But empathy it's the window into the child's inner world. It is the window that tells us what they need, what they're capable of in a given moment. It allows us to know what resources they have available to them to be able to manage a challenge. It is what tells us that they are affectively in a state where they need support. So, empathy is just a profoundly important window to the inner world of the child. And it's our ability to see and respond to that inner world that really ultimately translates into the child feeling safe and secure and attached.
And this might be a weird question, but is it possible to be too empathic? I mean, does the kid get the sense that the whole world is just a reflection of themselves?
I mean, I think the short answer is no. I don't think so. I think it's what do you do with your empathy? I mean, do you, when I feel that my teenager is really sad because he took the car out and he wasn't supposed to take it out and he wrecked it, now he's in he's a lot of trouble. I can be empathic with how much it stinks to have done something stupid and then to have it go poorly. I can feel that, but there's still a consequence for it that has to be carried forward. But I don't think you're ever in a bad spot using empathy unless it stops you from creating some of the structure that's really important. Kids need structure. They need containment. But that containment, I think we've talked before about padded boundaries. They need containment that we may set a limit, and then we have to run over and empathize with them and support them in tolerating the limit we just set. So I don't think you can have too much empathy. I know that there is a disorder, I can't remember what it's called. I read about it some years ago, about people who have hyper empathic states, and that it gets in the way of capacity. I mean, there are people who call themselves empaths, and there's a whole literature about that. That's a little new agey, but not altogether invalid. But there are folks who seem to have a debilitating level of feeling what other people are feeling, particularly pain. So that when they're in the presence of someone, in pain, they feel a physical pain. So, but that's out there a bit.
Yeah, and that's too much empathy for yourself, i.e. more than you can maybe handle. But I was curious more from the point of view of the child, so.
I don't think so. If it's accurate, if it's attuned. Now, we may think that we're empathically attuned to a child and then respond as if we've got this great understanding of what's going on with it, but it may not be truly attuned. It may not be good, real empathic awareness of what's going on inside the child. But I don't think, I've never found anybody in my life as being too empathic. There are times, though, I will say, there are times where when we want to be kind of brave and we want to persevere, and somebody comes along with empathy and goes, "Oh, how you leave me alone? I want your empathy."
Right, you don't want them to see that vulnerability,
and that can happen with kids too. I think that I like. It's really a good question, Kate, because I think that I think that if we have a child who's in a developmental challenging situation, and they need to pull their internal resources together and push through. Themes that means shifting away from their apprehensions. And empathy isn't just about empathy to their fears, their anxiety. It's also empathy to their drive, to their longings. And so real deep empathy may know the best thing I can do in this moment is not look too sad, because that may undermine the youngster's ability to look away from that and persevere with something they need to persevere with. So
right.
it is complicated in that way sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me just come clean and kind of tell you the root of where my question was, which was, I mean, so I'm with you in that empathy is important, and I have definitely, witnessed that and experienced that in my own parenting, and my parenting has changed a lot, I think, as I have become more empathic and tried to become more empathic. But so, for example, there were times when my older daughter was in the kind of kindergarten and first grade, and the playground after school, and we had to leave the playground before her friends did. And this was really, felt totally unfair to her, but I didn't see it that way at the time. And it felt like, I was a terrible mom. We had to leave to pick up her sister. So her sister was like, a big kind of boulder around her ankles. And, from my point of view at that point, I was like, well, she needs to understand that she's in this family system and other people have needs too. And, she got some playtime, so that's better than none. There's this whole list of reasons why she shouldn't be upset. But so
all very rational and right. Completely irrelevant. In the moment. I think the deal is that you needed to leave, and you needed to set that limit, and that was a fact. But your little girl, she felt all these feelings, and you still needed to leave. And if that manifested in her calling you a name or hit you, all those kinds of things. The only thing to do once a child has essentially become dysregulated for whatever reason, the only task at hand, there's no learning that goes on there. The only task at hand is to help that child regulate again. And empathy is core to regulation, because children learn how to self-regulate, and we'll talk about this, I bet, ad nauseum over our time together. Children learn how to self-regulate by co-regulating, by having adults who know how to feel empathically what's going on with them, kind of like that. They're this vibrating little bell, and the adult's awareness and empathy is like a blanket that's wrapped around it to quiet it, and it calms down. And then maybe you create a narrative or a story for what happened. There, and maybe later you come back and say, we got a family rule, sweetie. If you hit somebody, it means that this or that. There can be some consequence for it, but you sure don't do that once the kid's dysregulated. The only task at hand, once they've lost their mind, the only task at hand is to help them quiet. And once you get them quiet, you can then move into, you're not negotiating. You're not saying, well, all right, you're so upset, I'll let you go play for another 5 minutes. You don't really want to get into negotiating with really dysregulated kids who are kind of trying to take the reins of authority or power. But you do want to be gentle. You do want to say to the best of your ability, I know it stinks. I know you're going to, maybe even as you go, I know, sweetie, I know you're going to be mad at me, or you might be mad at me, but we've got to go. I've got to go. And you may feel sad about that, and I'm sorry, but we've got to go. Sometimes putting that empathy up front will stop the child from erupting completely. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes it depends on the kid, depends on how they're feeling that day, whether their blood sugar is low, just whether or not there's a special friend that they want to be with on the playground. But I don't think you're ever wrong in terms of delivering whatever you deliver with empathy. But that doesn't mean that you don't deliver what you need to deliver. Yeah. And that's because you got to go. We got to go.
And do they, then pick up at other times those other things? Like, what about other people's needs? Like, how do they kind of learn about that?
Through their empathy. As we're empathic with them, empathy is caught, it's not taught. We don't have to teach them that stuff. We're a tribal species, and we evolved because we had the capacity to care about one another, to see what one another's needs are. The idea that we have to teach kids about why things are, the way they are in terms of other people's needs is largely inaccurate. It is largely not necessary. It isn't a cognitive process. It's an emotional process.
So, I've read studies that empathy has been on the decline sort of dramatically, in the last generation. I think it's been measured in college students. And so that's, disturbing, especially if you're saying the only way to learn it in a way is to be given it. So if there are less people able to give empathy, then less people are going to learn it. Is that?
Yeah, I think that, the good news is that we keep learning, we keep having that visited upon us, and having the opportunity to catch it. It's not just early childhood. Those are important times. There's no question. And why it is that there are all kinds of socio-cultural reasons probably why empathy is on a decline. I think our families are so rushed and harried, and with mom and dad both working, all this. Empathy takes slowing down. It takes a degree of becoming present. And I don't think that we're a culture that gives us much of a chance to do that. We have to form it. We have to choose to do it.
Okay.
We have to get down on our knee when that little one's losing it and realize we're going to be 5 minutes late to pick up the other one. Get down on our knee and say, sweetie, I'm sorry. I'm sorry this is so hard, because she's lost it. When kids have really become profoundly dysregulated, it's it is frightening to them. It's disturbing to them. It makes them feel incompetent. It gets all kinds of feedback from others that, what the hell's wrong with you? So when we get good at watching a child who's doing this and saying the only task right here is to help them slow down. And then to go forward and do what we need to do. It's not like, they're going to take themselves hostage and say, if you don't do what I want, I'm going to become, absolutely dysregulated.
Right.
We don't want to be a part of that process.
Okay. So I have two questions. So one is, well, actually, three, but so one is dysregulated is like crying, upset, tantrum.
Lost it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so you said a couple of really important things in there, and I just want to highlight the thing that you just last said, which is that as a parent, when that's happening with our child, we have to be pretty sure not to lose it at that point.
Yes.
Because that's hard.
And it's not easy. No, it's not. But if we lose it, they've lost it, now we lose it, they're vibrating, and that actually undermines their ability to develop the capacity to self-regulate, because they need us to be able to stay. And when we talk about, how to co-regulate, which we'll maybe spend a whole hour on at some point, that means that parent they haven't lost their stuff. They're okay, and they're maybe matching respirations with the child. They're making it quiet. And then the next time that child starts to feel that, they have an emotional memory of what it was to come through it and to quiet. And then that's how we build self-regulatory capacities. Okay.
So, I don't know if you've seen these videos, but there's a particular age, and the postcards are for parents of kids of all ages. So, I hope, bear with me if I'm talking about just toddlers, but, around 2, 3, when the tantrums just really start, and it can be over, the wrong kind of fruit in their lunch, or it was cut the wrong way, or, you know, you're in the grocery store and the lights, you know, it's just over everything. And, you know, I think there's these online memes of like videos of kids basically having tantrums, which then there's been this discussion about like, well, that's, I really understand it from the parents' point of view though, because it's just so distressing, you know, to be trying to get through your day and just have these triggers that
it's embarrassing. I mean, yeah, it is. Those are the worst moments as parents, or some of the worst moments.
Yeah. So I guess I have two questions. One is like, how do you kind of keep it together in those moments? So one is like about for a parent, and another is like, you know, whether the child is dysregulated or not. What are kind of steps to get into empathy if you just don't even know like how to do that?
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you a quick story. I for about 25 years, I founded and helped run a treatment program for emotionally disturbed kids aged 5 to 18. And so I spent a lot of time with profoundly dysregulated kids. And it was a training site for Tufts child psychiatry program. And I would often have these child psychiatrists later, you know, who'd be observing some difficult situations. They'd come back to me and they'd say, "Oh my God, you are the most patient man on the planet." And the fact is, I'll say, "Oh God, I am anything but patient. But I'll be damned if I'm going to let this kid make me into somebody I don't want to be. I'm not going to give him that power. I'm not going to leave myself in a position." So some of it is just determination, saying this kid needs me to do this right now. I'm not going to let my insecurities, of which I have my share, I'm not going to let my insecurities get in the way of my doing this job that is my job to do, whether as a parent or as a clinician. It's my job to do that. I'm not going to let this kid. So some of it is the decision, and it's up front. You always want to plan your battle before you go into it. So if you decide that you got a little one that's really pushing the limits in terms of some wild tantruming, that you want to figure out that in that moment, the only task is to help them regulate. That's it. That's it. You just stop, slow down, you do it. It may be that next time they want to go to the playground, you say, "Sweetie, it didn't go well last time, so we're not going to go today, but we'll try it again tomorrow." And then, so what do you do before you go? You do lots of anticipatory guidance to help kids not have it. "Well, look, we're going to go to the playground. I'll give you a 5-minute warning when it's time to go. You know, it's hard. It'll be hard because you probably won't want to leave, but come on over. We'll have a piece of chewing gum in the car." You know, just all the anticipatory guidance so that when they get to that moment, you've already planted things in their head that make you present with them. "Oh yeah, mom said this. Oh yeah." So, you know, I think that there are a lot of different ways that we can try to manage kids who tend to be more reactive. But boy, once they've lost it, again, the only task at hand is to help them calm down and have a co-regulating experience. And we have to be quiet ourselves. We have to be calm ourselves to be able to do that.
Okay.
And it's taking a couple deep breaths. It's saying a prayer. It's doing whatever you need to do to get help through it.
Can it be dissociating a little bit?
It can be dissociating. I'm good with whatever, you know, and we'll talk at some point about what are the best ways when you have a reactive kid. What are the best ways to help them be less so? What are some of the things that are really useful in that regard?
Yeah.
Whether it's a teenager or a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old.
That sounds great. Okay, so back to empathy. So that's like in a situation where they're, you know, upset, dysregulated, to use your term.
Yeah.
What about in daily life? I mean, what are some practices or tips for parents to kind of incorporate empathy and to remember to do it and like know how to do it? I mean, I'd like to be more empathetic, but
all right, that's a good question. The first thing that you want to do is match the vitality of the child's emotion. This comes out of the work of a guy named Dan Stern, and it is about, now if this child is like this, you know, really upset, you can't come at them with kind of a lightness and go, oh, it's going to be okay, sweetie. Empathy, we want to find an empathic connection. So if the child's really upset, well, then, you may touch your heart. Your face looks like this is important. This is a big deal. And it's not an angry face, but it's one that matches the vitality of the child's emotion. And that puts you in a position to be able to be present with them for them to begin to feel felt, because that's the first step in co-regulation. They feel felt and they begin to quiet. So I think that's the first thing. Match the vitality of their affect, or match the importance of that moment.
Yeah.
With your facial. It's the nonverbals. This is another piece of bad news, guys. It is not so important what you say. Mm-hmm. It is far more important how you look. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that means you've got to develop a poker face. And one of the ways to do it is to realize, is to hold in mind that this little one that's going bonkers, that's just, having such, they have no clue how to not do that. Now, that's hard to remember because they feel so powerful to us. Like, my God, they're running my life. Mm-hmm. It's very hard in those moments to realize they don't know how to not do that. Mm-mm. But when we can tell ourselves that, and that it's my job to help them to calm down so that this doesn't happen as much in the future. Every time you successfully take a child through being blown away, completely worked up, upset, and you quiet them to a place where they're quiet, it makes it less likely that that's going to happen the next time.
Really?
Absolutely, because that's co-regulating, sets the stage for self-regulating down the road. Huh.
Okay, so nonverbals and match their affect. So just on a daily basis, wake up and see my kid in the morning, I should be thinking, what kind of vibes am I getting from them, and kind of just tune into that.
Yeah, I remember my kids. I work a lot with little ones, but a lot of my more recent memories are teenagers because my kids are, they're one's 40 and the other one's 36. But at least that's a little closer. But I remember that my son would come downstairs in the morning in our house, and I was always an early riser, and clearly he was not. And he would come down in that kind of grumbly adolescent attitude, and I would be cheery. I'd say, "Hey, buddy, you want this or you want that?" Or and he would just look at me like, if there's any place you could go away, just die, just get away from me. And I never really got good at unless I knew, because it was kind of playful. There was a playful quality to it. But if I knew he was really in a bad place, I mean, he had broken up with his girlfriend or wrecked his car, whatever the many things that happened in his life or her life, that if I knew that, and he came downstairs in the morning, then I'd be in a very different stance. I'd be in one of, how you doing, buddy? And he may, let me alone. But it's more matched to where that affect is.
So like a time when kids are coming home from school, I feel like it's a really kind of live moment for that, right? Because I mean, and in my house, it also feels like it just changes like multiple times a second when they're coming home from school, in that they'll kind of be on a high, but then all of a sudden all these kind of feelings come out. So
yeah. Well, a few different things that can be really helpful in that. One is ritual. When you have a ritual for whatever task it is, for dinner, for coming home from school, rituals help calm the central nervous system, because rituals mean that the expected is happening. And when the expected happens, our central nervous system is less looking for the unexpected. So it quiets down. So rituals are really helpful in anything that you're doing, particularly if you have kids who are a little more reactive. So a coming home ritual. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. It could be that you have cookies on the table for them, and that they have to go put their backpack where it belongs. So they kind of fall into the groove. Rituals are hard to do because in families, most families were busy, and sometimes we're not able to follow through with it.
And every day might be a little different. Yeah.
every day and if you have rituals and then you don't follow them, then that can kids can react to that too. So one thing would be doing rituals. Help me with the question again, Kate.
Yeah, no, it's just a question of you talked about matching your affect with the child, which is to me it's sort of like tuning into how they're feeling. And one time when that seems difficult for me is or just very important, and also like I really have to be on my toes is when they come home from school.
All right, here's another one. Shut up.
Okay.
Be kind, be expressive, touch, those sort of things. But when kids are a little bit rattled, when they're a little bit, and transitions are always hard for kids. They're always hard for lots of different reasons. We can talk about that someday. But transitions are hard. And that anxiety is in the right hemisphere. It's in the limbic system. It's in that part of the brain. And if we start talking a lot, which comes from our left hemisphere, it's an empathic miss. And they'll actually become activated because they'll see you don't get it. They'll feel that you don't get it. So don't use too many words when a kid is in a transition or just don't talk too much. It's hard. That's hard. But most parents are who are watching this are probably pretty verbal and they may be saying really sweet things. Another thing you got to be really careful about once they hit adolescence in particular is asking questions.
Well, I was going to say, the typical thing is, how is your day? And I mean, I've read that that's the wrong thing to say at the end of a day, but it's so, I mean, I wanted to know, and to pick them up and not ask feels sort of unnatural. So.
Well, I think you can pick them up and you can say something. I hope you had a good day, bud. Or there's a saying in this guy named Milton Erickson, who was a very famous hypnotist, psychiatrist, did all these kind of subtle hypnosis associated with storytelling. But one of his things was to get a man to talk about his brother, talk about your brother. So you give him a hug, you say hi, you kind of reading them the best you can. Maybe if they look sad, you look a little sad, buddy. What's going on? Or if they look happy, or they just look, whatever their standard mode is. Well, then just be careful about questions, particularly with older kids, because older kids are all about figuring out how to separate, how to individuate. And from their perspective, that means how to get the hell away from my mom and dad, how to get my mom and dad to trust me enough to give me the space that I want. So teenagers experience questions as effort to gain data that may be used in a future prosecution.
Not unwise, not incorrect.
It's not altogether incorrect. But it doesn't mean that you act disinterested in your kid. Not that at all. But be interested in what's going on in the moment, and know that they will spontaneously, once they feel like you're there and you're not trying to dig things, particularly older kids, then they will spontaneously put stuff out there. Or talk about your day. Say, I saw Mary Jane today. She drives me crazy. And the next thing you know, they're going to be talking about their friend who drove them crazy at school today.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes into what my other question was going to be. But if they are, should you try or should you not try? Should you just wait for it to happen spontaneously? To kind of help them like process or express any emotions that might be kind of lingering from their day.
I think that if they get in the car and you pick up on something without being too intrusive, I think you seem kind of sad. Boy, you seem excited. Not what happened, just, well, you seem excited. Or it looked like you were having a lot of fun as you were coming out, talking to Joey or whatever, and that, so I don't think, making observations about them is really makes them feel seen more than our seeking information about them, which makes them it's to some extent, we all want other people. We all want the people who we love to know what we feel and want and need without us having to tell them. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's just, and we're generally disappointed by that in our partners, which is, that's just normal. We got to work that through. But I think that kids, they don't want generally to have to download information to you for you to somehow know something about them.
Mm-hmm.
And they will, the idea of quality time with kids, quality time almost always occurs in the context of quantity of time. Almost always, because the child, that little roulette wheel of a brain that they have, it just lands one moment at, I'm going to talk.
Oh, interesting.
And then other times it doesn't. And trying to get it out, trying to ask kids why they did things, particularly things that make no sense that they did, and really coming at them to say, you help me understand that. And they're sitting there going, God, I don't know. I was hoping you had some understanding. That's what they're feeling. They're not thinking that, but they're feeling that.
Yeah, and feeling really put on the spot.
Put on the spot to answer something that they can't answer, and then half the time they make something up, or they just get angry, or they, they say what they think you want to hear, or what you believe, those kinds of things.
Okay, so the kind of first step is to attune with the nonverbals and kind of feel what
slow down,
feeling, and kind of
slow
down. That's the first step. And we should really be doing this all the time, right? When the whole time when we're with our kids.
I mean, there are situations where our kids don't need us to do that because they're resilient. And there's nothing wrong when they can self-regulate. Good. You don't need to be there doing it with them. Because every time they do it, they feel stronger and more confident. So it's not like we're supposed to walk around all the time just being so empathically attuned and doing, because when they can do it themselves, if we come in and we do it for them when they don't need us to, we've enfeebled them in a way. So it's watching for when they need it, and that's an empathic awareness that you're kind of trying to discern.
And then talk about the second step, which you were saying is this like making a story about it. So trying to understand like why they might be like this, or
once they are in a regulated state, once they kind of regained their mind, which is all that right hemispheric stuff. Once they're there, we can maybe begin to help them. The word is co-create, together with them, working together to co-create a story about what just happened. Because if they can now have a little narrative that goes with that feeling, then things make more sense. I'm less anxious. I've got a model for what goes, oh, that's how that happened. Okay, but don't go to that narrative too quickly. Because if you go to it too quickly, you don't even have to do it then. You can do it before they go to bed. You're laying in bed, it was really hard at the playground today, sweetie, wasn't it? You know what I think was happening? I think you were hungry, and I think that you were having so much fun. And sometimes it's so hard to have to do the stuff for your little sister. I get that, So all those things kind of came together, and oh my goodness, you kind of lost it, didn't you? And when you can be playful about their losing it, and then you can say, I lost it. I lost it the other day. Or so there's no shame. Shame actually promotes dysregulation.
Right. Okay. Yeah, actually, I was going to say that when we were talking about, even just the noticing, kind of observing their feelings, that has to be expressed very carefully, right? Because you can't say, oh, you seem sad, or you always seem sad, or what are you sad about?
Whatever you do, whatever you have words for, the feeling has to match it. It can't be, you seem sad. It has to be, oh, you seem kind of sad, bud. It has to be tender, and it has to have the emotion. And that's called an affective reflective dialogue. It's where the affect that you have as the parent is consistent with what you're saying. Because if it's not, it does not go in. It just goes in as a left hemispheric, empathic mirror.
Yeah, and it's dismissive as well, which I never really put that together, but that really makes sense.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
These are remarkable little creatures that we're assigned to take care of. And, I sit here with all these answers, but believe me, I made all my own mistakes. I work with young psychiatrists, many of them have young children. I'm fond of telling them, the cobbler's kids have no shoes and the preacher's kids have no religion. The psychiatrist kids are crazy. So just get ready. Mine, they survived it and they're wonderful now. But if they were sit here, they would have things to say about their dad who maybe didn't always co-regulate.
Yeah. So you talked about creating a story, helping them create a story about what happened. But what about also what the story that a parent is creating about what is happening for the kid? I mean, does that happen at the same time? And you would then,
help me with that question a little bit.
I don't know if I'm thinking like, back to this kind of playground example. She already feels some way about having a sister, and now this is like adding on top of that. And I can see these are new friends. She feels like they get more time, something like that. I mean, it's so it's me kind of, that's the story that I make in order to be able to be empathic with her.
You're co-creating it. You guys are working at it together.
When I'm just saying, I make that in my head, to enable my empathy, I guess I would say.
Well, that'll enable your empathy in the moment, but then when you're kind of processing it with her, when she's in a better place, you do it with some humility. Go, I wonder about this, and I wonder about that. Those are so. You never want to act like you know exactly what's going on or why it's going on. Mm-hmm. Some degree of humility, but just thinking about it, and that's how you co-create it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. That's helpful. Yeah. All right. Well, I've learned a lot in this conversation. Is there any other kind of thoughts that you have, or tips, tricks that you've learned over the years?
Be gentle with yourself in this process, because you're going to have bad moments, and you're going to have tears with your kids. Mm-hmm. And when the tears occur, it is your job to repair them. Maybe you can't repair them right at that moment because you want to find an iceberg to put them on to send off somewhere. So maybe you have to take a little time. But it is always, and you'll hear this from me ad nauseum, it is always the parent's responsibility to repair the tear. Now, if the child comes first and does it, well, then that's great too. Mm-hmm. But the parent can't just wait for it to happen. They may need to wait until they're ready to do it. So when kids get dysregulated, it's hard. It's embarrassing. It throws everything off. It's not how you want to relate with your kid. You then sometimes hear your least favorite mom voice, or maybe even your mom's mom voice, and you just go, oh God, I'm a horrible parent, and it's not good, and my child's horrible too. So so be gentle with yourself. It isn't easy.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that there are likely issues in most parent-child relationships where the parent just feels like the kid is wrong, or even, the teenager coming home with a crashed car example. I thought that was funny that you kind of even use that as an example where there might be over empathy, because I think that most parents would be like, that is ridiculous. And it's hard to even get to an ounce of empathy in some situations.
Well, and in that situation, I'm not saying that the kid shouldn't have his car taken away for the next 6 months or whatever it is. The consequences are still there, but the way that kids learn from their mistakes is not by becoming so ashamed and so dysregulated. So it is by their being able to be in their right mind as they kind of process the consequences of what they've done. And that with kids, so often the task is to set the limit, set the consequence, and then run around there and support them. And you don't move the consequence. You don't, that doesn't move.
Right.
But you're helping them figure out how to tolerate it and not be dysregulated. Because if they're dysregulated, and sometimes we'll look at Bruce Perry's, some of his schemas for for how ineffective the processing of information is in dysregulated brains of kids. When a child is dysregulated, they're not learning anything. So if we want them to learn from the limit, then we got to help them tolerate it.
And even before that, I would think that kind of thinking about, well, you know, what's going on, what might have been going on in his head to even make the decision to do that can help. I would think, you know, would help me kind of be in a space where I could feel like I wanted to help them tolerate the limit. Absolutely.
The more you can kind of go back and go, you know, I do get how you get put into situations, if it's the car situation where you're, you know, there are all those variables. There's that you have to try to hold on to and remember, because it will soften and make it easier for you to do what you need to do.
All right. Well, I think those are all my questions. I know I know that this is such a fundamental tool that we'll probably talk about empathy in every single conversation that we have. So I'm sure there's more to come, but this was super and great for today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kate. It's always a pleasure. You've got great questions.
I try, John. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye.